Thank you very much. And thank you to the program committee for choosing to include this year. I'm very happy to be on the program, and I hope you find this useful. I am on a project out of Ireland with a company called Realta, and in a code review with my colleagues, I was describing two of the things that I was doing as being declarative. And so when I said, oh, what can I do for Declarative Amsterdam? I thought, oh, I'll just dive deep into these two techniques that I was explaining to my colleagues, because if I get hit by a bus, they've got to maintain it. And so I better teach them about what I'm doing and make it easy to maintain. So if I do it declaratively, then it should be easier to maintain. And so the business case that I'm trying to solve lends itself to declarative techniques because of different authors, different sources of data in the same vocabulary. And the business case is standards, international standards. There are regional standards organizations like CEN and CENELEC. There are international organizations like ISO and IEC. And they publish standards for global or regional or global use. And national standards bodies, NSBs, they have sometimes a business reason, sometimes a legal reason to have to publish that NISO STS XML document for their constituent. Usually make it for sale. So there is a business case for these national bodies to write the XML that wraps around the international standard to give it some context for the nation's use. And so these different organizations are all writing NISO STS, and they are the originator of the document. And that's going to come up later. So I'm defining that term right now. So here I've described the two regional, two international, and other NSB originators. Let's use Norway as an example. They have many administrations, and their publishing is moving to NISO STS XML. And their roads administration, their construction codes, their petroleum standards are all written using NISO STS, and these are national standards. So they're standalone documents. And publishing standalone documents is really quite straightforward, but that's not all that they need to do. They are also adopting regional and international standards as an obligation. There's the NEK group, which adopts the electrotechnical specifications. The NORSC standards are the adoptions of CEN and ISO. If we, in these adoptions, they could have one NISO STS XML document where there are up to 3 different authors of different sections of that one document. And each of those groups that created the XML has an expectation for a visual appearance that may differ. So for an FO style sheet writer, writing XSLT rules, which are declarative, there's going to be a challenge that I'm going to go into detail. Now, these regional international suppliers make their STS available for download. So these national bodies, they go and fetch the content, pull it in, they merge, it gets merged together. But the challenge is, and I've used as an example in my code for you, I've used a non-normative note. So there is this STS construct called a non-normative note. What if that one XML construct has 3 different appearances and 3 different parts of the document? On your left, you can see an example of just an independent, this is the SVV, the roads administration document. It's a standalone STS document. On the right, one document that has 3 cover pages, because there are 3 sections of STS in the document. This is one pass through a publishing process, 3 covers, and inside each of those sections of the document, you have to find a different presentation of the non-normative note. But XSLT is declarative. You're declaring matching rules on non-normative note. How are we going to be able to do that declaratively and not imperatively when we're in 3 different sections? And in a way where I can satisfy many different clients who have different requirements or their own ways of presenting the information, and to accommodate different regions, because there's not just the European regions. The Gulf State Organization, Standards Organization, also has a regional obligation for 7 countries there. So in an authoring environment, on the left, you have an author is responsible for writing an SVV, well, the Roads Administration document. They don't know what the final metadata is going to be. They're not the editor, they're just the author. So they write an STS document on the left, and the editor on the right, they write a small shell document that has all of the correct standard metadata that's needed for this SVV document, and they merge at a national level the XML from this local location, and this document gets pulled in with the metadata ignored, and the body and all of its content, the front matter, the back matter, all gets formatted with the on-the-fly changes to the presentation environment. This style sheet has to be flexible, because when there are 2 ways of pulling in the content. Some countries want to merge, or they merge the national from the local author. They fetch the SDOs content, they fetch the IEC content, and the front and back matter at each adoption layer is grouped together. So the outer adoption has the national front matter, the national back matter. The European adoption inside has the European front matter, the European back matter, and the international layer has the front matter, the body, which is the content that's actually got all of the standards stuff that's being published, and the back matter. So you can see how the front and back comes before the nested, the adoption layer that is being pulled in. So there, you are not nesting the back matter. In a nested situation, where I have indicated that the SDOs content is nested inside the national content, and the IEC content is nested inside the SDOs, when that fetching is completed from these remote feeds, because the ISO and IEC and SDOs, they all make their standards available to national standards bodies as a feed. When it gets assembled, notice how the national front matter and back matter now surround the regional adoption. The regional front matter and back matter now surround the standard content, which has the front, body, and back. So the style sheets have to respond. Not only they just switch to a new set of formatting properties for a new section of the document, they have to switch back in order to do the back matter for the layer that they'd already done the front matter for. So the style sheets have to be written declaratively so that I can address both of these situations without having to do imperative coding. Well, XSLT 2, the code base is in XSLT 2 from 9 years ago, so it has not been brought further because in our publishing environment, we don't yet need the new features of XSLT3. But there are, remember, XSLT was designed for XSL FO. So there are features like named attribute sets. There's also named templates. There are named variables. But in XSLT, they are all resolved at compile time. So if I want 3 different sets of attributes to be used at different points in the one processing, the one creation of XSL FO, I can't use a named attribute set because it's resolved at compile time. It doesn't change at runtime. The import precedence has determined which of the variables, which of the templates, and how the combined attribute sets are going, and I can't rely on that in an environment where I'm going to be changing the properties at different times in the processing of one document with STS and with 3 different expectations. It's awkward to use imperative, if, else if, only one single variable or name content. And when I get a new client, I don't want to run the risk of disturbing my core code by putting into the core code accommodation for that client. And in an imperative solution, you have to do that. But in a declarative solution, you don't. You write the core to be responsive to the needs of the environment. And then as I go through the document, I'm changing the environment that's passed down to the core in real time. So I want to be able to accommodate both the publishing of a standalone national document and adoption of 1 or 2 layers of international and regional content. Declarative methods are very reasonable to use. The core, I'm at the point now where I very rarely touch the core because most of the appearances that are needed by the clients can be accommodated just in the formatting properties of FO. The encapsulation of this need for this need here for the different sets, because different clients are going to have different outsides. I've got Sen and Senelec here. I've got ISO, IEC. They all have different appearances. I assemble the style sheet fragments into what is going to be this style sheet to handle the incoming STS data. But that means I need to have some kind of declarative answer to these kinds of questions. Is this layer, so an STS document has arrived, and I'm going to walk through all the layers, and I need to know, is my style sheet going to be working throughout the whole document? Because I want a graceful exit at the beginning to say, hey, user, you've given me a style sheet, and that style sheet tells me it doesn't support the following layers in the incoming data. I want a nice, graceful response to that. I don't want to produce junk FO, which is going to produce junk PDF, and the user doesn't know that they're not getting what they need. So, is this layer supported by the style sheet? Process this construct using this layer's set of FO properties. So that's the replacement for the attribute sets. So this is a runtime version of attribute sets. While this may seem obvious, I tripped over this, and I want to go into detail about that, so that if you want to accommodate these kinds of declarative approaches, you won't make the same mistake I did. Also, our customers, our national body customers, sometimes want to override what the international layers have dictated for themselves. Sometimes they want to gather the table of contents together. For example, the national body, this layer here will include one TOC, and these two layers, which usually have their own TOC, will be suppressed. And so they want to do a global TOC instead of doing local, or they want to do from a TOC here, and then from this TOC and all lower levels. The combinations are crazy. So we want to be able to do that in a declarative fashion. I don't want to put logic into my core, because I'm going to make a mistake in the future if I go change that core. So let the fewer changes I do. So I'm depicting the onion skin layers of my style sheet using these boxes here. Those of you who know XSLT, the import layer is in the reverse order of the import statements, but I'm drawing them as they are conceptually, where the national layer style sheet wraps the core style sheet, which wraps a set of common constructs. And I've written it so that the core really doesn't need to know which layers are around it. It just gets used in the production of the output. So let's this simple example, the SVV national layer, when there's no other layers interfering and it just gets an STS file that is monolithic, then I get the nice result that's here, and really quite a drastic change from, or difference from, the ISO representation of sections and lists. They have pretty brown boxes and such. But in this layered adoption XSL, I have a layer for the national content, a layer for the SEN content, a layer for the ISO content, a core interpretation, which is just what we use when it's like JATS or some kind of basic presentation, and the common handling. So nice. I need to be able to now, in the core, ask questions like, okay, this STS data has arrived. How do I know that this style sheet is going to be able to accommodate the data that has arrived? I also need to say, okay, at this point, I'm formatting a non-normative note. Whose sets of properties, or what's the running set of properties I'm going to use for that? Well, apply templates and template matching is the way in XSLT we throw out to our world of our style sheet saying, I need this handled, please. Apply the templates that belong for this construct. And you throw it at your style sheet, and one of the layers will catch it, which is very declarative. It's not the imperative. I want to call that template. I want to say, here's style sheet, here's a construct, please format it. And let's do that for the copyright. So apply templates of this standard metadata, and please calculate or add to the result tree the copyright string for this portion of my 3-portion document. Well, the originator, so I've got this function here that determines the originator from the standard metadata. Is it the international originator? Is it the national originator? Is it the SEN originator? And what NEK wanted to do was, in the copyright string for the ISO document, they wanted to preserve the ISO copyright and add the national copyright next to it in the middle of the document. So now already they are changing the way the pages look from the ISO appearance by adding their copyright on the core pages, on the international pages. They're not doing that for the SEN pages in this example, and of course they have their own copyright in the national pages. Well, sorry, just want to make sure, yes. So we have things like next match. So this layer is going to intercept the ISO originator handling of copyright ISO. It's going to intercept it in the outer layer. It's going to say next match, which is going to put out the ISO copyright. It's going to come back here and it's going to add the national copyright after the ISO copyright. And then it's going to come back and the block will be finished. So now, at the point where I've said, please calculate the copyright string, that national layer has intercepted the ISO presentation of copyright and it's added its own copyright after the ISO copyright. That's a typical use of matching a template and doing a next match. In the send layer, it's not being intercepted, so you just get the send copyright. In the international layer, yeah, it's been intercepted, so it's going to be double. It never gets down to this point, which is just the empty template. So that's a typical use of apply templates. This was something new for me. In 20 years of writing style sheets, I solved this problem in a way that I never had before, and so I wanted to share this. I'm using apply templates not to create a fragment of the result tree. I'm using apply templates and its property of throwing the requirement to my style sheet and one of the layers of the style sheet catching it. I said, I need a Boolean value, please. And one of the template rules will catch that through a match and return a Boolean value instead of returning a fragment of the result tree. Now, I don't know how many style sheet writers here have needed to constrain template rules to return something other than a result tree, but this was new to me. So how did I do that? Somewhere in my document, I'm saying, and in my style sheet, I'm saying, let's determine the unsupported layers for the data that's coming in. So I want to create an error message to my user to say, I have received STS data for these originators that I don't recognize in this style sheet. So I walk through each layer and their front matter. It's either adoption front or it's front. And I assign to a Boolean variable whether or not this is supported, this layer, and this layer here, because this is my current node. I apply the standard meta child of that current node, or the front matter, sorry, the current node, the standard meta child of the front matter, in the mode check. And I'm saying, who's going to handle this? And I throw it out to my style sheet. And in each case, when the layer is the national originator, this will catch it and return true. If it's the send layer, this will catch it and return true. If it's the ISO layer, this match will catch it and return true. If it's the Rialto layer, and we do sometimes have Rialto specific document, but otherwise, if none of these match in the typical XSLT matching set of rules, this template rule, constrained as a Boolean, returns a Boolean. So it's a declarative way of getting variable values instead of a declarative way of doing template rules. Here was result tree fragments. The copyright example I showed you is just a declarative way of doing adding to the result tree. This is a declarative way of getting variable content. And so whenever it's false, if it's not supported, then I add to this set of strings of unsupported layers the originator of this metadata, and I can create a nice error message for my user saying, I have received STS data for this originator, and this style sheet won't support that. So that was one of the techniques that I wanted to share with you that was new to me. In all my style sheet writing, I haven't had to do this, and this was the best way I could think of to solve the problem. Now, what's my real-time replacement of named attribute sets? And that is a set of formatting properties C:(F). All of my variables I put into a namespace. That's just my writing style. It allows me to mix style sheet fragments with different namespaces without any collision. So I am in the practice of using namespaces for all of my variables. So there is a core definition of a set of formatting properties to be used by the core XSLT handling, the generation of the FO. Actually, I've got this spelled out here in larger font. So, core format is a document node. It has these C note prefix, and there are many dozens of sets of formatting properties. These are my named attribute sets. These are the names, and these are the sets of attributes. And I use this variable assignment with the push asking, okay, at this point of the document, what are the set of formatting properties I'm going to use to format this layer of content? And it's going to match down here. It's going to return the core set of formatting properties, which is this document. And when I match a non-normative note, I'm going to do my FO block, and my named attribute sets is a copy of my running C:(F), which was this tunnel parameter here, the note children, and all of their attributes. And I do an FO inline, and then I copy C:(F), note prefix in that. And this is the core that I never have to touch, because I just declare different sets of attributes for the different layers. And when I begin processing that layer, I send down in the tunnel parameter the set of formatting properties to use. Now, this was very, because it was declarative, it meant I could do a number of very helpful things. Imagine that Sen wanted the prefix to a note not to be bold. Now, it's a contrived example, but it's something that I can explain easily from the dais here. So the Sen format is going to set up a note prefix formatting property of font weight normal. And when deciding which set of formatting properties are going to be used for the Sen layer of content, it's going to combine first the core format properties, followed by the Sen format properties. Now, this is the same block of code. Notice that what happens, because the core format comes before the Sen format, when I copy C:(F), note prefix set of attributes, I get the note prefix font weight equals bold, and then it gets replaced with font weight equals normal. That's the final status. And I get the non-bolded note. And I haven't touched the core. And I haven't touched the way Sen does things, excuse me, no, that's the next example. But so the way Sen does it, they just declare, I have coded the Sen to be a set of overrides from the core. Everything is a set of overrides from the core STS. Most people use STS the same way. There are just these few differences. Well, dozens of differences, but yeah. In this contrived example, what if the client wanted to change the way that ISO supports non-normative notes? They don't like the boldface on the note prefix in the ISO document. And so they actually want to change the way ISO presents their notes. Because I've done it declaratively, that's not a problem. What I can do is in the ISO fragment, I'm just returning the core set of formatting properties, which is font weight bold. It's ISO properties, which don't touch the font weight for note prefix. But in the client style sheet fragment, and it gets used because it's at a higher precedence, when I ask in this mode, SQL and format, please tell me what the formatting properties are for ISO. My client later does a next match, which copies in all of the properties from the ISO style sheet, and then adds a new document node with the override. So there's going to be a note C:" note prefix element in here, which is bold, and now I'm going to override that with normal, so that when that copy is done, it's going to copy the bold first, and then it's going to copy the normal. And now that ISO layer, and I haven't changed the ISO fragment at all, but I've been able to influence the way the ISO layer presents itself because I've been using declarative methods. And that has allowed me great flexibility to respond quickly to user requirements. So again, this is the complete solution. I have C:"F, and for the block, for the FO block, copy the note attributes in the inline, copy the note prefix attributes from all of the C:"Fs, and they're either the way they were authored or the way they were overridden by the client. And it worked until it didn't work. And I wonder if there are XSLT style sheet writers working day-to-day with XSLT can recognize, which I didn't do until I realized that it wasn't working, so I figured out what was going wrong. Why would, so I added a new national layer, and the national layer had a set of properties, and I assigned to my C:"F all of the core format properties followed by all of the national format properties. And the national format properties weren't there when I was done. Can someone think of why? Because it's not obvious. And I'm really challenging the Saxonica folks here. What's wrong? What have I done wrong? Yeah. Yes, they are sequences of attributes, yeah. Well, it's a sequence of, no, actually, it's a sequence of document nodes where there are attribute descendants. Okay, time's up. The problem is the slash does a document order sort on the left-hand side, and there is no defined document order for document nodes. And so for years, all of my clients' document nodes were in the correct order, but this one reason for whatever Saxonica was doing in my use of style sheet fragments, it happened to put the national in document order of document nodes. It put the national document node ahead of my core document node, and the left hand and the slash copied the national ones first, the core ones second, and then the core ones were the ones that were left. Very obscure, took me a while to figure it out, and all I had to do was bend XSLT2 to use the bang instead of the slash, and the bang preserves the sequence order of the left-hand side. Now, I see people like Alan are still have furrowed brows. So, oh, you do? Okay, good. Because the document nodes, it's not up to me. It's up to the implementer to have a document order of document nodes. As a user, I was relying with the comma, I was relying on sequence order of the document nodes. And so in order to respect sequence order of the document nodes, I should have used a bang. And all I had to do was replace them all to bangs and everything worked fine. But keep that in mind. That, yeah. Would you have gotten that very quickly, Eric? No, I didn't either. That was the problem. Document order is not defined for document nodes. And so this is the working code with the bangs. Well, it turns out that C:"F really came in handy, because now I could write algorithms in my core that not just relied on the FO properties, but could rely on any kind of parameter that would configure the result and tweak that parameter on a per layer basis of the data and have different appearances. So again, I've got the one FO document that with the same STS construct in 3 different places is producing a different visual result. And this, here are 2 entries from my C:(F). I mentioned the TOC scope. You can specify for each layer of the data, each layer of the data, which of those layers are to show up in that layer's table of contents. And you can set Boolean values, you can set strings. This is my internationalization phrase lookup. This is the word contents in the current language. Please return the, well, I just put that into a C:(F), and I always grab the last one. And the last one is what ends up getting used in my algorithm. And so now a customer comes with a new need. I want to aggregate all my TOCs. That's just fine. I'll just override C:(F) for all the layers to turn them off in the other layers and turn that to global in the national layer. And I've done no coding changes to the core. It's all declarative. And then one of my colleagues asked me to explain what I was doing here. If you can see what I'm doing, I'm documenting an attribute value. And rather than put that into some comment and try and relate it, because this is, you know, lots of stuff. If you ever need to document declared attributes, this is the way I do it, and it seems to work well. So, no, okay. Page down, function. There we go, page down. I got it, Nico. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to share with you. Those of you who are style sheet writers and are really into the nitty-gritty, I would be pleased to talk about these kinds of things. I find this stuff fascinating. I enjoy solving real-world problems, and the declarative approach is so often the way to go, because I'm making all of these changes for clients and I'm not touching the core code. So it works really well. Thank you very much.
Any raised hands? Yes.
Yes, Eric.
Erik.
You told at the beginning that you were limited to XSLT 2. Is that?
Oh, only by choice.
Only by choice, because
yep.
I was looking at what you're doing and it's very nifty. But you could have also have done it using maps and overriding keys in maps and stuff like that.
Probably, but the code base was in XSLT 2.
Okay, which is good reason. Okay, yeah.
Is there something new in XSLT 3 that I could use here? Well, yeah, I know about maps, but
I without saying the code again, I'd have to. I may be wrong, but I would have thought that if instead of returning effectively a sequence of document nodes,
yes,
when you did the next match and the override, you through to the next match and took that result and added it in, so you were returning a single document node.
Yep.
Contained
with the order
concatenated children. And then preserve the order, and then you could still use the slash and not the bang.
Exactly, and that's why I say note that for a pure solution, create and return a single document node with the ordered children.
I missed that, so anyway, good.
Yep, I recognize that to be true, but it was a lot quicker just to do a global replace on. I could identify those slashes because of my use of variable names. Yeah, some people disagree with my choice to put all my variable names in namespaces, but that's just Ken's way of doing it.
Nobody else?
No one Slack?
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you very much.